I've only briefly talked about this in the past, but one of my favorite aspects of the Persona series are the way the characters and their stories are influenced by the tarot cards. I love learning about the meanings behind the major arcana, and using that information to examine the comparisons between the characters. These three characters may not seem like they have much in common, but as members of the Magician Arcana, they actually do. In the Persona series, every Persona user is represented by an Arcana, and since the introduction of social links in Persona 3, we even see regular people influenced by the cards as well. By carefully examining the personality, stories, and struggles of these characters, we can often learn a lot about the traits of the Arcana that they're attached to. But one thing that Trinity Soul never really covered or explained were the Arcana of the main cast. So, for this 2-episode series, I'll be going back to Trinity Soul. That's right, you thought we were done with it, but I'm just getting started. For 2 more videos, where I'll be doing my best to see if I can deduce the Arcana of each Persona user in Trinity Soul. First, I'll obviously be looking at the character. What is their arc in the story? What actions do they take? How do they act towards other people? Of course, I'll also be taking the persona itself into consideration and looking at its mythology and overall backstory. Secondly, I'll be looking at the meanings of the arcana that I believe they best represent and see how well they match up. For example, if a tarot card generally represents a more stoic nature, it's not going to fit someone whose personality is that they're boisterous and short-tempered. And third, I'll be comparing the character to others from the Persona series that I believe they share an arcana with. We can often look at recurring themes between characters and use these to help us figure it out. Now, because of this, I want to be very clear and upfront. This series will have Persona spoilers in it. Not only will I be spoiling Persona Trinity Soul, but any Persona game from 1 to 5 is on the table as well. Taking these 3 things into consideration, I think I'll be able to make an educated guess for which arcana works best for these characters. So sit back and get ready as I take a look at 15 different personas in Arcana Revealed. So this first episode is going to be looking purely at our good guys. I'll be looking at the 3 Kanzato brothers, Megumi, Takuro, and Kanaru. So let's get started with that trio of brothers. Ryo, Shin, and Jun Kanzato, and their personas, Cain, Abel, and Seth. Cain and Abel were the 2 sons of Adam and Eve in the Bible, and in one of the most well-known biblical tales, Cain ended up killing Abel, becoming, according to Christian mythology, the first murderer. Adam and Eve supposedly had multiple children, but the only other one that was ever mentioned by name was the child Seth, who was supposedly born specifically as a replacement for Abel. Cain and Seth went on to have many children of their own, with Seth's bloodline being seen as virtuous and true, essentially leading to famous figures like Noah and even Jesus himself, while Cain's bloodline was typically seen as more vile and unholy. So basically, we've got 3 Christian brothers representing our 3 brothers here, and I think it's a solid choice thematically speaking. Trinity Soul didn't seem to use this story much to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, as Cain doesn't kill Abel by the end of the series, though the first episode does at least allude to this possibility. Now, with Shin, I think it'd be incredibly easy to just say, he's a protagonist, so he's the Fool Arcana, dust my hands, grab some Taco Bell, and call it a day. But I think there's a bit more to it than that. The Fool is an interesting arcana in the Persona games, especially in the newer titles, because it's generally associated with the power of the Wild Card, which grants our protagonists abilities that most other Persona users don't have, such as the ability to use multiple personas, as well as turn bonds into strength. While we don't see Shin utilize any of these abilities, we do see him interact with Igor in the first episode. And while an argument could be made that Shin doesn't fit many traits of the Fool Arcana from a Persona perspective, I think he fits it just fine from a tarot perspective. In tarot reading, the Fool typically represents the start of a journey. We definitely see this from him returning to his hometown and basically kicking off the entire plot. Other traits of the Fool Arcana are innocence, perhaps represented by his repressed memories, freedom, which we see not just from his constant pushing to follow his own path against his brother's wishes, but by Abel's ability to sever personas from their hosts actually being described as a freeing experience, and creativity, which we see regularly through Shin's artistic talents. Shin fits in just fine with the other newer protagonists as a member of the Fool Arcana, and so that's what I'm declaring him as. Now, next up is Jun, and he ended up being a pretty tough one for me. He's one of the more complicated characters in the series, and there were arguably several Arcana that I think fit him pretty well. For a good while, I honestly thought Jun would fit really well in the Lover's Arcana, which tends to represent a fork in the road of life and being forced to make a difficult choice. But the more I looked into Jun as a character, especially in the second half of the series, I think Jun may fall under the Hanged Man Arcana. The Hanged Man is one of the trickier cards in the tarot deck. Its meaning can be incredibly vague, but one of the most universal traits of the Hanged Man is the idea of self-sacrifice. Even on the card itself, we see the titular Hanged Man hanging upside down by one foot, but in almost all tarot decks, the man's expression implies he is there willingly. Self-sacrifice in an attempt to help others, but not in an ideal position. Throughout Trinity Soul, Jun is a character that just sort of goes with the flow. He rarely expresses his own desires, and it seems the majority of his actions are done for the sake of other people. It's later in the series, though, that Jun reveals more of what he actually wants, which is just to be alone, which fits into some of the Hanged Man's other common qualities of confinement or feeling trapped. To do this, he volunteers to let himself be kidnapped so they can locate the Maribito hideout, he literally gives up his own body to his sister Yuki, and at the end of the series attempts to sacrifice himself in the hopes of saving everybody. Jun is a character that regularly puts himself in unsafe or compromising positions with the sole intention of doing so to help people, whether those people are his allies or even his enemies, as we see from him protecting Saki and even using his support-based powers on members of the Maribito. Compared to other characters of the same Arcana, we can see this as a regular thing. Baofu completely sacrificed his own personal and professional past self in order to create his new identity. Persona 5's Iwai abandoned his past self and tried to keep it all secret for the sake of his adopted son, and Chidori Yoshino's main power involves literally sacrificing part of her own life in order to restore it to others. Even a minor character like Persona 2's Yasuo Inoue, who represents the reversed Hanged Man, shows qualities there. Those of the reverse Hanged Man are typically shown to make rash and impulsive decisions, less of a careful sacrifice and more of a whatever happens, happens. The Hanged Man is a rather complicated and confusing arcana, and even its meaning in the tarot decks make it one of the more obscure cards to derive meaning from. But frankly, I think Jun is a rather complicated and confusing character, so I think it fits him pretty well. And finally, we have the eldest Kanzato brother, Ryo, and let me be upfront here, Jun may have been the most difficult for me, but Ryo is without a doubt the easiest. Ryo and Kane represent the Hierophant Arcana. To put it as simply as I can, the Hierophant Arcana typically represents tradition, authority, and sticking to your core beliefs. And when we compare Ryo and Kane to other members of the Hierophant Arcana, it becomes even more obvious. From Nanjo to Sojiro, nearly every Hierophant character is seen as an older character who has a fixation bordering on obsession with something in their past. Shinjiro is an upperclassman who can't let go of what he did. The elderly couple who runs the bookstore spends most of their link wanting to hold on to the memory of their son. Dojima is obsessed with what happened to his wife, and even a more obscure character like Metis takes on the role of Aigis' older sister and subconsciously wants to restore things to how they were in the past. An elder character with a strong grip on the past that turn these events into their driving force is practically a universally seen trait of the Hierophant Arcana, and fits Ryo Kanzato just as well. So, that covers the Kanzato brothers, but we've still got 3 other personas to look at today. I'm going to be covering these based on the order we see the personas themselves in the series, and that means next up is Takuro Sakakiba with the infamous Spartacus. Spartacus was a Thracian slave who was trained as a gladiator, and while there are so many stories about him that it becomes a little bit muddled, he was said to be a brilliant tactician who escaped with several fellow slaves, and his gladiatorial skills and military maneuvering allowed him to fight off soldiers sent after him. He was seen as a leader, a hero, and honestly so much of a true rebel that I'm kinda surprised he wasn't in Persona 5 given that game's theming. Now, because of Spartacus' role as a leader, I feel as though he and Takuro would fall under the Emperor Arcana. Takuro has a lot in common with fellow Emperor character Kanji Tatsumi, as they're both teenagers who felt pressured and ostracized by society. So in order to rebel, they changed their appearances so that people wouldn't be as inclined to bother them. Kanji bleached his hair, and Takuro went full afro. And while I'm on the subject, the Persona 1 protagonist was an Emperor character, and he pierced his ear. We have no idea why, but I'm gonna assume it was some sort of rebellion. It's pretty common for Emperor characters to put so much effort into controlling their life and their situations, but something usually ends up happening to shake that up for them. Akihiko struggles with trying to be powerful, Kanji struggles with his identity and hobbies, Takuro struggles with a subconscious fear of his own persona that causes it to rebel against him. Again, we even see this with social link characters, as Hidetoshi from Persona 3 was so obsessed with adhering to the rules that he didn't realize he wasn't seen as a respected authority figure. And in regards to other personas, the Emperor Arcana is typically filled with powerful male leaders, from Amon-Ra to Caesar to King Frost. I'm also aware this doesn't apply to everyone, but Caesar and Takemi Kazuchi both focused on physical and electric attacks, both of which are used by Spartacus as well. So because of all this, I declare Takuro Sakakiba and Spartacus to be the Emperor Arcana. Next up, we have Megumi Kayano and Diana, who, if I had to guess, would fall under the Empress Arcana. Diana is a well-known figure in mythology, and is the Roman counterpart of the Greek goddess Artemis. Diana is a goddess of fertility, the hunt, and the moon. She's often seen as a protector of motherhood, which fits with common traits of the Empress Arcana in tarot reading, several other personas of the Empress Arcana, and also fits pretty well into Megumi's story arc involving patching things up with her stepmom after the death of her half-brother. In the Persona series, Empress characters tend to be very protective and nurturing towards people they care about, which we can easily see from Yukino's relationship with Anna, to Mitsuru always pushing herself for her team, to Haru just being the sweetest, fluffiest cinnamon bun in the whole wide world. Megumi is a character that always wants to protect others, like making sure they don't do dangerous things like shadow extraction, to going to nursing school so she can take care of people. She fits the Empress Arcana very well from every angle. And the last character we'll be looking at today is Kanaru Morimoto, and both her personas, Astarte and Ashtoreth. Now, like Diana, Astarte is often seen as sort of a mother goddess, originating in the Middle East. Astarte has been spread throughout several different regions, including Egypt, Greece, Ugarit regions, Phoenicia, and more. She was worshipped by Canaanites, Mesopotamians, the list goes on. Ashtoreth is merely another name for basically the same goddess as she evolved throughout different cultures, including supposedly being the inspiration for the demon Astaroth. What's fitting about Kanaru having both Astarte and Ashtoreth is while the design of Astarte definitely fits with her being a goddess of love and fertility, the more dangerous design of Ashtoreth fits as well, as she was also seen as a goddess of war. Now, even though Astarte from Persona 5 was classified as the Empress Arcana, I believe this interpretation of Astarte with Kanaru fits better with the Priestess Arcana. Common traits of the High Priestess Arcana are desire, mystery, and a passion for knowledge. It can be seen as an arcana of upcoming love and that your body will be going through some important changes. Kanaru definitely has a lot of things in common with other members of the Priestess Arcana. They are generally depicted as intelligent women who happen to be very shy or nervous around others. Everything from Maki creating an ideal version of herself who happens to be more outgoing, to Fuka being a total recluse, to Yukiko hiding the fact that she's a total snickerpuss, are all indicative of them as members of the Priestess Arcana. And Kanaru's timid nature and her eventual crush on Shin makes her feel very connected to other characters of this arcana. But what's most interesting is when we look at the Ashtoreth side of Kanaru, the one that was secretly working for the Maribito and feeding them information, we have to look at the Priestess Arcana from a reversed position. If the upright priestess represents sensuality and a thirst for knowledge, the reverse can often result in acting on impulse and desire and deep sexual tension, which you can't tell me we don't see throughout Kanaru's battle with shadow extraction addiction. Both sides of Kanaru fit the priestess and reverse priestess, and it's kinda cool to get to analyze a character on each position of the tarot like this. Alright, so there you go, our 6 main heroes and the arcana I think best represent them. Do you agree or disagree with my analyses? Is there an arcana you think would fit any of these characters better? Feel free to let me know all that and more in the comments below. I will see you all again next month when I'll be going over the members of the Maribito, and remember, The Arcana is the means by which all is revealed.